Those of us concerned with racial inequality in the 21st century have become accustomed to defining the problem in terms of wealth and income gaps, home ownership and homelessness rates, incarceration percentages, and gerrymandered maps that distort political boundaries. But racial inequality is also expressed through unequal investment in our infrastructure. It's seen in our city streets, underfunded public schools and parks, and in our neglected water aqueducts and pipes that affect the community's access to clean water. And when financed by municipal bonds, debt-financed infrastructure creates business opportunities for banks, investors, and others at the expense of the most vulnerable and marginalized communities. It's time we talk about solutions. Throughout the 20th century, infrastructural inequality was made through public policies that promoted a racialized approach to economic growth and financing decisions. During the 1930s, during capitalism's greatest crisis, federal housing officials and local realtors looked to jumpstart the U.S. housing market. They traveled around the country seeking to determine which neighborhoods were safe investments for federally guaranteed mortgages and which were not. More than a few of the nation's metropolitan centers were rated poorly by federal officials due to underdeveloped physical infrastructure. Thus, the effort to emerge from the Great Depression and which communities were able to financially rebound rested in part on improving the nation's infrastructure. In the years after World War II and America's burgeoning and increasingly white suburbs, the ability to secure federally guaranteed mortgages on new residential developments was often predicated on improved roads, sidewalks, and sewers. Homeowner demands for and government policies in support of improved infrastructure not only transformed shack towns into white middle-class suburbs, it stimulated an entirely different market, the municipal bond market. The municipal bond market allows states and local government borrowers to issue debt. This allows borrowers to spread the massive costs of capital improvement projects over an extended period of time. Debt, in other words, was and remains crucial to funding public infrastructure like parks, libraries, public housing complexes, and the like. In many of these suburbs that relied on the municipal bond market, strict racial segregation was the rule. And in urban neighborhoods such as Detroit's Coralville section, white homeowners enforced the rule by enlisting block captains and organizing against the alleged invasion of a black family in March of 1950. This meant that although the bond market was supposed to finance public infrastructure, the public was racially differentiated. The pressures on cities to improve deteriorating infrastructure on the one hand, and the attempts by investors to shield their capital from high federal marginal tax rates on the other hand, only enlarged the municipal bond market. In addition to working to borrow at low interest rates, city officials had to entertain the ethics of debt. That is, they considered which kinds of projects, which neighborhoods, and which communities were worthy of debt and investment. The question of worthiness was layered, at once an ethical consideration and an issue of economic growth. Embedded in countless city planning documents was a hope that white middle-class professionals would resist the pull of suburbanization, drawn instead to new housing developments downtown, new parks, new parking facilities, new stadiums, and other improvements to the consumer playground. So often, the realization of urban revitalization through whiteness was predicated on the dispossession and displacement of Black and brown residents. In communities around the country, infrastructural inequality was furthered through debt-financed displacement and debt-financed investment in racially segregated white neighborhoods. Infrastructure has long been a conduit for improved life chances, but today, in the United States and beyond, infrastructural failure and abandonment continue to subject Black and brown communities to premature death. The deterioration of water pipes and delivery of languishing, discolored, lead-based water to the residents of Flint, Michigan comes to mind. How then do we advance the cause of racial and economic justice through infrastructure? Building off the work of Deborah Archer and the efforts of Sharon Hing and the Legal Services of Northern California, legal scholar Stacy Scheck-Snyder insists on a racial equity impact statement in the arena of infrastructure. It is worth quoting her vision at length. Every development project powered by public subsidy should be required to demonstrate who benefits and how, whether it is perpetuating segregation or whether it is restoring choices and opportunity denied under law in prior decades. A required equity impact statement not only inches toward remediation and repair, but also prevents infliction and further injury. And we might endow a federal agency, one armed with sufficient regulatory and enforcement powers, to oversee public financing projects along these lines.